Today's episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Today we're talking about Rolex's new sneak attack surprise release that they just did at the Academy Awards. Pretty interesting, awesome story, and something that has a lot of precedent in Rolex history. But I also am seeing this trend now with Omega and Rolex, these surprise releases. A lot to talk about today, and I'm wearing the only watch I would ever wear to the Academy Awards. Not that I would ever be invited, nor would I accept, obviously, right? They're all weird people. So I will actually tell you all about this watch and what makes it so incredibly special a little bit later in the episode. Piaget is exploding on the market right now, and rightfully so, and this is a really, really special model that I would never sell. So stay tuned in today's episode for more on this wild piece of history. What has happened most recently? Rolex, being a major sponsor of the Academy Awards, doubled down on their partnership with the Academy this year and released both a film and a new mysterious date that has absolutely no context. No one knew if it existed or not. It wasn't weird enough where we would know that it didn't exist. It looks like something that very well could have existed, unlike another time that Rolex did this just last year, which we'll get into in a second. So what's the watch? This is a Rolex Date 840 in Ever Rose Gold, which is Rolex's proprietary rose gold mix. And its dial is described by Rolex as ombre slate, kind of this gray dial with this sort of vignette effect. It's a really beautiful watch. It's great. If this watch were released at Watches and Wonders, no one would talk about it. It wouldn't matter. Nobody cares. But the release plan was really interesting, right? Rolex put a lot of effort into, I think, maximizing the impact of their, sponsorship with the Academy Awards. And I think that's smart, right? I mean, I and many people also have always kind of wondered why Rolex, didn't do more brand activation or partnership activation, right? I mean, Rolex does a lot of partnerships, but they don't really make them feel special or interesting. Rolex just pays a lot of money to put their brand places. That was all the time. And it's a good strategy. God knows, right? Rolex has done great. But it always could have been a little bit more special. And I think the reason why Rolex never made it a thing, right? Never wanted to work harder, was because I think that, Rolex's brand position is the idea of working hard almost feels like you're begging, and people will feel that. And I actually agree with Rolex, right? I think that a lot of the time this limited release conversation makes it feel cheap, right? We had a long form discussion about Grand Seiko and the psychological effect that their constant limited edition release schedule has had on the market, on folks, right? On regular watch geeks and their psyche. It's weird, right? Rolex has been so afraid of looking like they're begging or they kind of need your money that they've gone so conservative that it's silly, right? They've gone almost too far the other way. And now they're moving back, right? And I say they're moving back because this isn't the only example of this release strategy, this surprise, release that also is limited and ungettable and probably not for retailers, right? But rather for relevant, or rather deserving parties. And deserving, I believe, in their mind is, within the circle, right? You could only get this watch if you are within the circle of the collaboration. I think that's interesting, right? That is not what goes on, generally speaking, right? I mean, when a watch brand does a limited release, they want everyone to compete to get it. When Rolex is doing a limited release, they're saying, we're telling you, we'll show you that this exists, but it's not for anybody else but the people we made it for. And that's cool, right? That's confident, right? That is a smart way to navigate the partnership activation without looking beggy, right? They're brilliant. Rolex is great. Guys, we have all of so much to learn from Rolex, right? So when did they do it before? And why was it more special, for better or for worse? Just last year, 2023, Rolex released another intelligent partnership activation, right, limited edition watch with the Vienna Philharmonic. Now, I think that was an amazing place to start because the Vienna Philharmonic really represents everything that Rolex looks for in a sponsorship opportunity, right? Rolex only ever wants their brand around, the most prestigious and wealthy environments, right? Period. It's part of the reason why Rolex, even though in the grand scheme of watches is approachable, and in turn, right, they garner abnormal interest from wealthy folks, right? I mean, a lot of people with a ton of money, would logically be interested in other brands. But because Rolex does such a good job branding, such a brilliant job, branding and being in the conversation in the right way, they are still able to, grab the money of people that you otherwise would have thought would have graduated, right, from Rolex, right? So they do this with the Vienna Philharmonic. They do this in the golf world, right, with the PGA Tour. They do this obviously with the Academy Awards. They do this obviously in tennis. They do this in all of these places that are, just kind of exclusive, right? I mean, none of these places are private clubs per se. They're places of, I don't know. I don't want to use the word values, but at least aesthetically speaking, right, on a behavioral level, values that reflect the Rolex idea, right, of achievement and of not subtlety, but kind of class, right, for lack of a better word, right? Decorum, maybe that's the right word, So to activate this partnership, and this partnership is longstanding, but this activation to this level was for the first time. Rolex released a limited edition dial in a 36 millimeter yellow gold day-date, featuring this violin motif in all of these varying green colors. And I believe the dial, I think it may have even been enamel as well, taking it a step further. Now, a lot of people didn't like this watch. They thought it was ugly. It's neither here nor there. It's essentially unimportant. What's important here is really what we're talking about, right? That Rolex went out of their way to kind of change their behavior, to be a little bit more proactive in their partnership activations, and because they're so intelligent, without jeopardizing their sort of more established sort of stoic, we don't need your money, right? We're not begging. We'll never beg, kind of behavior, right? Very impressive. And we've seen a similar tactic, obviously, from the likes of Omega, particularly with Daniel Craig, right? Using the Bond series as an opportunity to really, invest in that relationship, right? It's not just a sponsorship. It's a priority for the brand, right? They designed this watch with them. Obviously, it's much more approachable. It's much less subtle. Well done, tastefully done. But that relationship, I would say has been seen through, right? Omega has given the resources that the relationship deserves, right? It's not just plastering your name. It's going further, right? But Rolex, just by being Rolex, the titan that they are, right? This more conservative, more elusive brand, they will, no disrespect to anybody else, but they will always have a more, interesting, profound, mysterious allure in their activations than Omega, right? Simply just not offering the retail aspect, right? Omega is doing this more as a retail opportunity, also as a marketing opportunity for the brand overall, of course. But Omega does retail these watches, right? And they're not that limited, right? Whereas Rolex is taking a much more elevated approach. I think another great example of this in Rolex history, which is pretty recent, is their activation with James Cameron, who is among the most longstanding Rolex partners, right? I mean, James Cameron and Jackie Stewart are maybe two of the most famous, right? You've also got Michael Bublé, you've got, Roger Federer, you've got Martin Scorsese, you've got a long list of people, sure. But Cameron is a really important Rolex ambassador, I would say. And Cameron really embodies that Rolex message. I mean, the guy is a pro in the brand speak. He's done a couple of videos in the past talking about the importance of Rolex in his life. He wore his Submariner while filming Titanic. He then gave that watch away to a leader of a tribe when he was doing exploration for another one of his films that had given him a great honor. And he thought, what greater honor could I give back, right, to show my appreciation than taking off the item that means most to me and giving it to him, right? Brilliant. I mean, they couldn't have paid James Cameron enough, right? period. I think the only problem there is that not enough people saw the video, which, again, Rolex doesn't want to promote too hard because then they feel like they're being beggy. That's the never-ending push and pull or dilemma of the Rolex marketing teams, but I digress. That was a unique collaboration. I've never seen anything like this with Federer, never seen anything like this with Scorsese. You've seen some videos with Scorsese, but you've never seen Rolex develop a piece essentially in collaboration or subtly in the honor of, right? The Rolex Deep Sea, blue to black is a commemorative piece for Rolex, right? Activating a partnership, activating their efforts with this ambassador. Really smart. I think that may have even been the first, right? That may be the first, example of this. So you've got the James Cameron, you've got the Vienna Philharmonic, and now you've got this Academy Award piece. I would say, and I'm not going to die on this hill because I don't know, but I would say that, Rolex doing the Deep Sea James Cameron with James Cameron was an abnormal effort at the time. And there's been quite a bit of time in between. And now you've got a 1-2 punch with the Vienna Philharmonic and now, the Academy Awards that I think you'll see this more often. I don't think it'll be regular, maybe once a year. But I do think that this will be a part of their, annual business practice. I think you'll see this in golf. I think you'll see this in tennis. I think that these production numbers will be so low and you'll see just a little bit of content about it, just a little bit. And it won't be, right? It will never be for retail. You will never be offered one of these watches unless you are a member of the group that they are sort of, honoring their collaboration with, right? The idea is Rolex only chooses a small handful of people, right, of brands to sponsor. Right? Most of the time when you have sponsorship, it's a brand throwing money to get their name in front of something. Right. And they would kind of sponsor almost anything. I mean, within relative reason, but kind of, right. It's just a matter of, basically impressions and who the viewership is. Right. And as long as there's that match, boom. Rolex is far more discerning. I think that their brand guidelines are stricter. Right. Rolex is one of the only brand sponsors, I think, that, almost it's an honor to get a Rolex sponsorship, right? It's like, the other brand is being so complimented by Rolex that they would even entertain the idea of sponsoring your event. Whereas generally speaking, sponsorships are just a little bit more transactional, right? Rolex is almost, they're almost bestowing upon you, right, a great honor, right? It's very similar to their AD model, right? I mean, if you own a Rolex authorized dealer, right, that isn't just Rolex doing business with you. Right? Especially now as we move into the next 10, 15, 20 years, their brand plan is really selective with ADs. They're basically saying, if you own a Rolex AD, they're saying you are one of the very few people in the world that we would ever trust with our brand. That's not the same with other brands. Other brands are way more like, hey, you got the money for the build out. Hey, you're going to follow brand guidelines. Let's do it. Not Rolex. So I wanted to just take a second and talk about this. I think it's a really interesting strategy from Rolex. I love to see it. I can't wait to see more of these collaborations. I love the Vienna Philharmonic. I grew up watching it every New Year's Day with my grandmother and my mother, the rest of my family for that matter too. I love seeing Julie Andrews. It's such a nostalgic thing for me. So it's really special. Let's take a quick 60-second break and thank our sponsor for today's video over at Squarespace. Had it not been for Squarespace, I certainly wouldn't be sitting here today. Squarespace's ability to offer website templates and domains is second to none. I have tried their competitors. I won't name them, but I've tried them, and nobody beats Squarespace's templates, functionality, and ability to build incredible websites that really look like you've spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars. Yes, of course, you could, if you have the resources, go allocate $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to a website in a breeze. Some people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. But when I tell you a Squarespace site through their template system looks from day one like you've been around and funded and professional for years, it's unbelievable. Squarespace is really one of the reasons, and certainly the only company that I would say is in large part responsible for our success here at Theo and Harris. And now with their new Fluid Engine system, they allow you to drag and drop and manage your site with the easy click of a couple of buttons. It's really amazing. Last but not least, it's their customer support that allows you to feel comfortable and safe and educated throughout the entire process. So head on over to squarespace.com/Theo Harris to save 10% off of your first website or domain. Head on over today and make your business all the better. So that leads me into the next portion of today's conversation, which is the watch on my wrist. The watch that I would wear, the only watch I think I would wear to an event like the Academy Awards, a gala, things like this. This is a tank watch signed Bulgari and Piaget, which is already pretty interesting, but I can make it even more interesting for you. There's another brand involved in the manufacture of this watch, and that is Cartier. So let me tell you a little bit of history about these three brands and their relationships. So we're going back to the 1970s, I believe. And if you know anything about Cartier history, you'll know that Cartier had a very difficult time managing the production of their wristwatches. In fact, for a large portion of the 20th century, Cartier watches were being manufactured by basically three separate, almost autonomous companies: Cartier New York, London, and Paris. And in the era, there was a period where Cartier and Piaget were not only in conversation, but were in active partnership, where Piaget would manufacture Cartier watches. Right? They were essentially lending their, production capacity to Cartier to fulfill their scale plans, right? Their production and their growth. But what's funny about this partnership is they manufactured two models, I believe. There may have been a third, but to my knowledge, there were two models, the Tank Louis and the Tank Normal. But neither of those two models, when they were manufactured by Piaget, were, one-to-one accurate, models of the Cartier Louis or Normal. They were Piaget versions, which is really very odd. I mean, what a bizarre idea, right? It's Cartier calling up another manufacturer saying, "Hey, can you help us manufacture, these watches?" And they say yes. So they say, "Oh, and also you can make them a little bit different." That's weird. These Piaget watches did, of course, resemble the Louis and the Normal, this being the Normal, but they had different proportions. Like, this is the Normal, and it's so much thinner than a Cartier Tank Normal. There was never a Cartier Tank Normal this thin. But of course, when manufactured by Piaget, there was. I'm not exactly sure how this relationship progressed. I believe in 1988, Cartier actually ended up taking control of Piaget, and then both brands were inevitably sold to Richemont. But without even going there, whatever agreement they had on a production or licensing level, it did ultimately lead to a situation where not only was Piaget manufacturing these funny little tanks for Cartier, but Piaget was also manufacturing these same tanks with their own name on it. Right, without the Cartier name. And this is what we have here. So this case is absolutely the case that Piaget manufactured for Cartier and put the Cartier name on it. But here, there's no Cartier name, and instead, there's a Bulgari name. It's a Bulgari stamp, because Piaget at the time was asking Bulgari for help in selling and distributing their models, so they were using their retail locations. So this is just a bizarre watch, a bizarre piece of history of kind of the business side, the manufacturing side, the licensing side of the watch industry. It is an 18-karat white gold, essentially Piaget/Cartier Tank Normal, retailed at Bulgari with diamond sides, right? I mean, these sides would have represented in the original Cartier tank design the tracks of the tank, of the Renault tank, right? So anyway, I found this watch a long time ago. I paid not a lot of money. I think I paid like $2,000 at the time, and nobody wanted it, and I knew I had to have it. And now this watch is worth quite a bit more just because of the history. But I love it. I'll never sell it, and I wear it every fancy holiday, right? I wear it every New Year's Eve for sure. I wear it when my buddies and I get together and do our elegant, fancy, almost comically overdone Christmas party. I don't wear it enough. But I do love it. I would never sell it. And I just think it represents such an amazing piece of watch history. I hope that you liked this episode. If you did, go ahead and like it. Go ahead and subscribe to our Patreon at the Zero if you like more content, more unfiltered content. And that's it. I hope you liked that episode.